You're gonna need a bigger boat. Why so serious? I am Iron Man. This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Well, welcome to episode 521 for February 13th, 2023. And I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Jay Ledbetter.
Thanks for joining us this week, everybody. Welcome to the brand new JD and Jay show.
Heyo.
Version of the podcast.
The fans have been clamoring for it.
Because every time Jay and I get together, it always goes according to plan.
Fireworks, baby.
So this is what everyone has been clamoring for, clearly. No, Ryan could not be here. He has prior obligations. And Brendan is going through some family stuff at the moment. People are sick. And so he unfortunately could not be here. So it is just going to be Jay and I as we talk about everyone's favorite, Steven Soderbergh. Magic Mike's Last Dance is out in theaters right now. Our review should be up by the time this goes live, so you can go and check that out. I'll be using that film as inspiration. Jay and I are going to talk about Steven Soderbergh. We're going to talk about our gems, our Soderbergh gems. And Soderbergh is, ironically, we joke about some of the fireworks that have previously been sparked between Jay and I, but we're both Soderbergh guys. So maybe there'll be some disagreement, but I think this is mostly going to be a fun excursion into the mind of Soderbergh. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Ryan and I did our Soderbergh series last year, so
which was fun,
I am
really fun.
Very, very well versed on all things Steven Soderbergh. I watched all 30 plus of his movies last year, so relatively fresh takes on my brain, and there are definitely some duds in there. But when you do those deep dives, you dig out those gems, and there, maybe there are some films that I don't know if you've seen all of his movies, but maybe there are some that you haven't even seen that I'm going to be like, look at this one. Look at this one. This one cost $25, and he shot it on a GoPro, and it's a low-key masterpiece. Who knows? I don't know, but I mean, it's going to be great. I actually have not had the opportunity to see the new Magic Mike yet, but really looking forward to it. Those are films that my wife and I have really loved watching together. So hopefully we'll be able to get out to the theater soon and check those out.
I'll be curious to hear how you like it, Ryan. I don't think will, but maybe he'll surprise me. Brendan, I think, will be mixed on it as I was. I would not be shocked at all if you are by far the highest of the four of us.
Wow, why is that?
Raving. I don't know. It just there are classic Soderbergh isms to that film that we did talk about in the review that I think you'll certainly take to heart, and it'll trump whatever criticisms that you can launch at the film. I think that you'll come away higher on it, but I could be wrong. Who knows?
I'm
excited. I think when it comes to Soderbergh, because I think about it in this way as well, at least in relation to how I respond to someone like Soderbergh or even Spielberg. As much as I have really liked Spielberg in the last decade or so, I can look at some of his films like Bridge of Spies, for example, or even West Side Story, films that I like. But I can also maybe pick out a few things that don't work for me in those movies, and you're like, no, these are masterpieces. Like these are Spielberg at his best. I'm like, okay, like I respect that take, and so I can kind of see the same thing happening here.
If we've got a Bridge of Spies on our hands, we got something special going on. So I did hear somebody refer to it as the Ocean's 12 of the series, which definitely had me intrigued. But
I can see that.
And I think that might just be in like not what you expected, kind of. But I don't know. We'll see. Because Magic Mike 1, I think, is like this very layered, interesting movie. Magic Mike 2 is it's a popcorn extravaganza, like great, fun, poppy movie.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what they have in store for 13. I said it like it was Ocean's 13.
Magic Mike 13.
For Magic Mike, Magic Mike's Last Dance. I'm really excited to see it. I mean, Channing Tatum's been on a nice little run here the last couple of years, so really looking forward to it.
Yeah, Tatum is the best thing about it, I think. I won't speak to it too much here since you haven't seen it. I'll just simply say I'm curious. I'm especially curious to hear your thoughts given what you just said there, because I think that Magic Mike's Last Dance, and I do talk about this a lot in the review, is essentially a concoction of the first film and the second film. Like, it's trying to have its cake and eat it too, and I don't think it does it very well. But again, there's the Soderbergh isms that I just can't help but fall in love with. And that's why I use, like, recent Spielberg as maybe another example where I think, like, I could just see you coming away perhaps recognizing those flaws but still loving it more than I did, or any of the four of us did. So, but we'll see.
Well, you got me even more excited. I can't wait.
But we're not here to review Magic Mike's Last Dance, but we're going to talk about Soderbergh and some of our hidden gems. We'll also do a Q&A once again, because we had some questions from last week that we did not have time to get to. So we'll round out this show with some more Q&A and get to some more of those questions. We'll do our best to get to the poll this week as well. We ran out of time last week to talk about last week's poll. So we'll do our best. And since it's just Jay and I, hopefully we can manage to make all of that work. And perhaps we'll get to some other things at the end of the show. There was a trailer that was released during the Super Bowl that I know Jay is very excited about. So we'll have to give his
There are some I'm excited about, but I think the one you're specifically mentioning, maybe not my favorite.
Maybe not. Yeah. So we'll see. We'll get to that, and maybe if we can find the time, Jay, another film that you and Ryan talked about on Extra Film, because you guys did a James Cameron movie series last year.
Oh yeah,
which was a lot of fun, and you guys talked about Titanic. Titanic is a film that was re-released in theaters, and shocking, it retakes the lead over Avatar: The Way of Water.
James Cameron is competing against himself for the highest grossing films of all time.
I love
just
that
incredible.
So much.
Just incredible.
Just incredible. But I did see Titanic over the weekend. I saw it for the first time in God knows how long. It's been a while. So maybe we can offer up a few thoughts about that at the end of the show as well. All right, let's start here with Steven Soderbergh. I guess before we get into some of his gems that we like to champion, what do you think about Steven Soderbergh on the whole? This guy has had a weird career, an incredible variety of movies.
Yeah.
What do you think about him? And you noted that you guys did the Soderbergh series last year, but if you had to summarize what that series was about, what did you take away?
I mean, the takeaways were what an eclectic career, and as far as what do I think about the man, I love him. I mean, I absolutely love him. Does he have some movies that I don't think are particularly good? Sure. Do I admire the boldness of the choice to make those movies? Absolutely. And, between it was our Robert Altman movie series, which we also did over on the podcast, and then the Soderbergh series, where it's like I became way less precious about a director having like no duds, It's like you don't have to make a masterpiece every time out,
Yeah.
I respect the desire to get out there and make a movie and not be afraid to make a mistake. And what Soderbergh does is Soderbergh is just like, yeah, I'll try that. It seems like with every movie, he has like a little thing that really catches his attention and he latches onto, and it's like, sure, I'll make that. With his first cell phone movie, it's like, yeah, I'll shoot a movie on an iPhone. Absolutely, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
With Kimmy, it's like, yeah, we'll do a pandemic movie that's this really claustrophobic kind of Home Alone pastiche sort of thing, And then occasionally it's like, hey, do you want to have 12 movie stars in your Ocean's 11 remake movie? And he's like, I don't know if I can do that, but I'll give it a shot because that sounds interesting and it's something I haven't done before. And he's so adept at making both these kind of small independent films. There's an argument to be made that Sex, Lies, and Videotape is one of the most important films in the independent cinema movement of the last, 30, God, it's been like 35 years.
Yeah, we talked about that a few weeks ago on the Sundance episode.
Yeah. A hugely important film. And then from there, he has this really kind of weird stretch where he can't really recapture that artistic, those heights that he achieved with Sex, Lies, and Videotapes. He's sort of wayward. And then he starts coming back with more pop entertainment later in the decade. I think Out of Sight was really the one that brought him back as a real commodity, as a really desired filmmaker. And even though there are some films even before that are accomplished and good and worthwhile, but nothing quite like Out of Sight. And from there, he really establishes his mainstream aesthetic. But then also he's still like, can I do this weird thing? Like, I made you, $300 million with Oceans. Will you give me $3 million to make this bizarre movie that otherwise I couldn't get financed? And that's what's so interesting about him. And nowadays, he's so in tune with the commercial landscape. He is like, sure, put my movies on HBO Max. It's whatever. It's the realities of making the movies that I want to make now. He says things in interviews like, look, we know whether a movie is going to be successful Friday afternoon. If it's not going to be successful, put it on VOD. Just do it. Who cares, right? Yeah. He's so interesting in that way. You have all these filmmakers. You have your Tarantinos and your Paul Thomas Andersons, who I also love, but they're so precious about. It's all about the theaters. It's got to be shot on film. We need to maintain the classic qualities of cinema. And Soderbergh's like, I don't know, iPhones, HBO Max, who cares? Whatever. I just want to make my movies. Let's go.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I think that's what makes Soderbergh such a fascinating filmmaker. Even with his more mainstream work, there's still this experimental nature to them that you can't help but love. I also adore that in so many of his movies, not all of them, but in a lot of them, not only does he direct them, but he will edit them, or he'll be the cinematographer on,
or shoot him. His pseudonyms. Yeah.
Just such a fascinating guy. But you're right. You look at his career and it starts off on this vital note with Sex, Lies, and Videotape. He comes back into the fold with Out of Sight, which I still think is one of his best movies. Then you have movies like Aaron Brockovich and Traffic that do very well with the Academy. Ocean's 11 is a big hit. And then what does he follow that up with? Oh, I'm just going to remake Andrei Tarkovsky, one of the most prolific filmmakers ever.
Why not?
Let's do it. Like, most filmmakers, I feel like, would be scared to touch that material. And he's just like, let's do it. And maybe we'll get into this a little bit later, but I also think that's one of his best movies. I love Solaris. But then he, goes out and does a movie like Bubble, which I don't even know if that's available. You might have to Jack Sparrow that movie if you want to see it.
Bubble is just like, I don't think it's entirely successful. It is just like, let's spend, a week making this movie. I found this camera on the ground when I was grocery shopping, and let's make a movie about a doll making factory. It's a wild movie. It's
pretty wild.
Just the existence of it is wild.
I agree. Then there's the Che films, which are interesting in and of themselves as well. He predicts the global pandemic with Contagion, which we talked about back in 2020. And then he's like, let's make these male stripper movies with Magic Mike. And so you just can't ever guess
that are actually about like the Great Recession. Yeah.
Exactly. But Side Effects, I think, is fascinating. You have Unsane, which is classic experimental. Soderbergh, Let Them All Talk, I know is a film that you and I both really like as well. And Kimmy was one of the better, underseen movies, overlooked movies of last year, however you want to frame that. But I really liked Kimmy quite a bit. So, the one thing about Soderbergh that is undeniable is that It's just the variety. He is not afraid to go into places that will either challenge him, maybe make him uncomfortable, or just do something that no one else does. And we haven't even gotten into how he shoots his movies, the color palette of them, which we'll certainly get into here in a second. But
although again, it's not like he has a. That's the thing about Soderbergh is how do you define a Soderbergh movie?
Yeah,
you kind of can't.
It's hard,
which is a fascinating thing because Ryan and I do these movie series and we're kind of obsessed with the idea of the auteur and kind of digging through the DNA of the filmmaker and what their worldview is. With Soderbergh, it's like he's just throwing stuff at the wall sometimes, and he's just he latches onto these small ideas and just like goes with it. And you see his, I don't know if you've ever looked at his kind of like annual, here's what I watched the entire year or what I read or whatever. He keeps that diary. Yeah. And it's just like he just watches everything. He takes in everything. I honestly admire that when you ask him what his favorite movie is, he's like it's not a cool thing to say, but my favorite movie is Jaws. Like I love that movie.
Yeah.
And his honesty in that I think really speaks to his willingness to lean into like all the directions of his personality, be they commercial or kind of more auteuristic or artsy. He's just a really fascinating guy, a really cool guy. He's great friends with David Fincher. Seems like an awesome pair to hang out with. Hit us up. You can be on the podcast. Brendan and Ryan are out. David Fincher and Soderbergh
is a great time to get you on the show.
Yeah.
I'd love to have him on the show. So if I had to, and you're right, it's really hard to determine what is a Soderbergh movie. I did try to think about this a little bit before hopping on the show tonight. And if I had to summarize it in a few bullet points, is that, to me, it's a series of dichotomies in the sense that his films, I think, are personal. His characters feel very lived in a lot of them. Even some of the experimental movies that we've already talked about, the characters still have these lived in qualities. But I also think that much of his films, whether it be thematic or just in terms of his broad storytelling, they have this universality to them as well. And then you think about how he has like these small stories that he's telling or these intimate dramas, and then you juxtapose that to these big, large-scale action films that he's done. And then there's the humor of his films. There's the poignancy of his films that I think are at the core of them as well. And then there's the cinematography of them. One of the things that you and Ryan talked about quite a lot in that series was the color palette of his films, right? Like there's a clear distinction in how he shoots and frames each scene, which on its own terms, that's fascinating. But the color palette to emphasize character and drama is really interesting. It's maybe more prominent in something like Traffic.
Traffic is one of the most influential looking movies of the last 25 years.
But I think that color
good reasons and bad.
Yeah, for sure. But I think that color palette duality is infiltrated into all of his movies in some way, shape, or form. That's maybe the most obvious, but I do think it's certainly there. And the other thing too, and I briefly talked about this in our review of Magic Mike's Last Dance with Megan, is that his movies have like this observing effect to them. Like he uses the camera as if he's there, or he wants us to be there in the room with his characters, and we're just observing what's taking place. And we're a part of the conversation. We're a part of the drama. We're a part of the scene and how it's unfolding. And that I find really interesting as well. That's a big part of Traffic. I think that's a huge element to Solaris. Or even on a smaller scale, I think that is a big part of something like High Flying Bird They came out a few years ago
for
as
sure.
well.
Those iPhone movies, absolutely. Yeah. But also he can make a big, grand Hollywood film like
Absolutely.
Out of Sight, which is very kind of classical, and it's just this is a movie with enormous movie stars that is going to be so elegant and personality focused. Just and as Ocean's 11 and the Ocean's films in general are kind of the same way. Ocean's 12 is like this extraordinarily ornate, gorgeous movie. I think that is like maybe his best looking movie, just as far as put it on mute and look at it. Ocean's 12 is like chef's kiss.
Very well
Absolutely
shot.
fantastic. I would say if there's one thing thematically that he seems to tie himself to, it's power structures, I think. I mean, you look at almost all of his films, they're in one way or another about someone trying to overcome some sort of institutional power that they are below.
The marginalized is a big
Right.
part
Whether
of
that's,
his
you
movies.
see it in Magic Mike with this idea of, sex workers in the world who can't get a loan. You see it in Ocean's 11, ex-criminals trying to overcome the upper crust of the casino society. You see it in Out of Sight with, just kind of these lower class people, again, trying to overcome these big kind of corporate bigwigs. I mean, it's all over the place. So thematically, I would say that's kind of his biggest thing. I mean, side effects for sure. These big pharma companies.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's whereas Sex, Lies, and Videotape, you look back on that as far as power structures, that's about the very essence of who establishes power and what power means in sexual relationships, and that's a fascinating interpretation of what that means, a fascinating exploration of what those things mean. So I would say if there's one thing that he's really kind of obsessed with, it's that. Yeah. And he's really good at exploring it, but he can also just be wholly entertaining in that exploration. You can watch Ocean's 11 and not think about that for 1 second and get
Mike.
Everything you want out of that movie, or Magic Mike.
Yeah.
But then
I
if you kind of take it beyond face value, it has a lot to offer as well.
I agree. Or even something like Contagion, you can watch that as this intense drama about people trying to survive and cope and not think too much, at least pre the global pandemic. I'm curious maybe how that works now, given how much we've seen our culture wrestle with not just big pharma, but governments and their inability to cope with a global pandemic and how much of a struggle that was. But I think Soderbergh does such a great job with that movie that you can just watch that as a work of entertainment, and watching these characters
works
try to
great
survive.
as a thriller. Yeah,
it works great as a thriller, and you don't have to necessarily wrestle with, at least in real time, what that movie is doing in terms of governmental systems and their instabilities. So yeah, I completely agree with you. That's all over his movies, and I think a big part of why that is so effective is that he just really cares about his characters, and he cares about the stories that he's doing. That's, I think, a big reason why the experimental nature of some of his films are so effective, because he is doing his damnedest, even if he's doing something that is just throwing to see what sticks, but he cares so much about his characters and investing into them that, even if it doesn't work, you're still compelled by what the characters are choosing, what's driving them. And he gets great performances in all of his movies, which is a big part of that as well. You think about some of the actors and actresses that he's worked with, you can make an argument that they've done their best work with Soderbergh. I know that is very much the case with me and Clooney. Channing Tatum, I think, is very much in that conversation. You can really go down the list there, but the way that he personalizes a lot of his movies, sometimes it's with the camera work and letting those performers simply interact with the camera, and a lot of it is also in the writing and really tethering all of that together. But to me, that's even his lesser films have an appeal to me, I think, because of that. There's still something to how he approaches his characters, how much he cares about them, that you don't always get with other filmmakers. But it's effective for him. And
in some ways, it is kind of his obsession with kind of those power structures. you do feel sometimes that he's kind of like, what can I get away with? Because of my commercial success, what can I do that other people can't do? And that kind of, in an industry that is so much about, focus groups and trying to make sure that we can squeeze every dollar, return on investment, I want to challenge the status quo and get something made that seems impossible, or try something that's never been done before and convince people that I can do it, and convince people that it's financially viable, because he always has that on his mind. He made these movies after Sex, Lies, and Videotape, and doing the reading that I did during our Soderbergh series. He makes it very clear that he realized, if I don't make commercially viable films, I won't get to make movies anymore.
Yeah.
And so he started kind of creating this hybrid strategy in his mind. And you could say he does kind of have that one for them and one for me theory going through his filmography. But also, he has inside of his commercial films a level of artistry that not many other commercial directors have. And so he finds a way to do that Jaws thing, where it's like, this is a cinematic masterpiece and also wholly entertaining on its face. And he figured out how to do that. You look at something like Aaron Brockovich, this, very comedically minded in many ways message movie that is about a lot of stuff, but is also about the pure magnetism of Julia Roberts that people flock to the box office to see.
Exactly.
And he figured that out with Clooney. He obviously figured out with all the Oceans guys, but
for sure.
He's one of the great. He understands the appeal of movie stars better than any director working today, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree, and that's very indicative of his late 90s, early 2000s output for sure. And it's interesting that duality that you bring up there, that after the success of Sex, Lies, and Videotapes, he makes a few other movies, but in order for him to survive, he has to make these commercially appealing movies. Then you fast forward to today, and it's interesting how there's a little bit of a reversal of that. There's the success of Magic Mike, but since then, what has he made? Movies for streaming, movies that don't need to go to the box office, right? With Side Effects did go to theaters, but if that came out today, that is straight to HBO Max, right? That wouldn't hit theaters if that came out today, but it came out a little early before the streaming wars began. But then there's Behind the Candelabra, which obviously went to HBO. Now, Logan Lucky was the commercial film there. But after that, Unsane, High Flying Bird, The Laundromat, Let Them All Talk, No Sudden Move, Kimmy, all streaming movies. And then it's like, okay, well, I did those. Now it's time to go back to the box office. So Magic Mike it is.
Well, I mean, the thing about Logan Lucky is 20 years ago, that movie makes $150 million. It is a movie of a bygone era. And that seems to be kind of the inflection point of his career. And he's made smaller movies now. Even Magic Mike's Last Dance is a significantly smaller movie than something like Logan Lucky, I think. This big kind of classic Hollywood heist movie. And he just seems to have kind of accepted his place in the Hollywood ecosystem, which is, I have less interest, it seems to me, I have less interest in making these big blockbuster movies because I don't really understand the blockbuster mentality of today. And it is funny that is kind of my interpretation, because he's currently making a third movie in a franchise. So in many ways, he is kind of following the formula, although certainly there's a big difference between the Magic Mike franchise and the Avengers or whatever. And, Soderbergh could go make an Avengers movie. I'm sure Feige would be like, yeah, you want to make, I don't know who's left. I don't even know. Some Doctor Strange 3. Sure. You can do that. But he clearly just has no interest in that. It was the Ocean's films. Ocean's 11, the original, is like not a good movie. It's not good. And they were like, you have free reign to do this. You're not remaking The Godfather here. Just make a heist movie. And he did it. He made it his own. And now nobody else can make an Ocean's 11 movie, I don't think. Although, they did Ocean's 8, I guess. But as far as actually reframing that original film and rebooting that franchise, I don't know that it could be done, because he kind of made the definitive version of that movie.
Yeah, so what's really interesting to me about that and what you're saying there, I think, and maybe you'll push back on this, and that's okay, but I would argue that Soderbergh himself has proved that the notion that nothing can be remade is not necessarily true, because, as I noted earlier, I think Solaris, and I love Tarkovsky, I love him, but I think his version of it is just as good as Tarkovsky's. Fundamentally, I don't subscribe to the notion that a classic movie is the automatic be-all, end-all. I just don't think that's untrue. And I think, not Tarkovsky, but I think Soderbergh has somewhat proven that with his version of Solaris. And it certainly doesn't take away from Tarkovsky's iteration of that film. It's a classic. It's a masterpiece. Many consider it to be one of the best movies ever made. And that's very fair. I do think it is very good. I love Tarkovsky's version of that film. But there's something about Soderbergh's treatment of it that I think heightens it emotionally. I think the performances are a little bit more engaging, and that maybe goes back to what you're saying in terms of how he's able to channel movie stars and get the best out of them. And Tarkovsky wasn't interested in garnering legendary performances. That wasn't really his forte. And so I think there's
very different movies.
They are, absolutely. I don't disagree with that. But I say all of that to say, in 20, 30, 40 years, if someone else wants to do a remake of Soderbergh's Ocean's 11, it seems a little odd, and it's hard to fathom that anyone would ever top it. But based off of what my experience with Solaris, I'm not opposed to someone else trying in time because of that. And I get that everyone won't agree with that. But that's kind of where I stand on it. And it's funny to me that Soderbergh is the reason why. Like, Soderbergh himself is the reason why I'm okay with someone else doing another one of his movies.
I would say the difference is he had such a different spin on Solaris, such a reinterpretation. I don't know how you reinterpret Ocean's 11. It's just like, I'm going to make the most entertaining movie of all time. and he pretty much did.
You never know. Someone else could do it, though.
Yeah. But he, the Solaris comparison is really fascinating, because Soderbergh is so much more focused on the emotion of that film, whereas Tarkovsky is much more philosophically minded.
Very, yeah.
And that's a really heady movie it throws a lot of dialogue at you. It throws a lot of ideas at you. Whereas Solaris is a movie that really makes you feel, really wants to make you feel. It's a much more elemental film, I think, than Tarkovsky's film. And I definitely do prefer the Tarkovsky movie, but the Soderbergh Solaris certainly has its merits. So you're totally right. Soderbergh did just kind of throw my own theory about his films in my face. So a very good point, a very valid point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess as we somewhat transition into his filmography and the movies that maybe resonate the most with us, for me, it is Solaris. That's a top 3 Soderbergh for me. And I don't know, the more I think about it, and I know that this is very hot takey, I don't really mean it to be, but it truly might be my favorite Soderbergh movie. Ocean's 11 is great. And I will distinct that, the difference between favorite and best. In terms of Soderbergh's best movie, that very well could go to Out of Sight or one of the Ocean's movies. I know you guys prefer Ocean's 12. I probably will stand with Ocean's 11. But both are
11
very
is my favorite, although 12 I think
okay.
is like also kind of a masterpiece. But
there's something about that emotional approach to Solaris that I really love, and I do appreciate the Tarkovsky version. It is perhaps a little bit more pragmatic. It is more heady and philosophical for sure. I also think that Clooney gives the better performance of the lead performances. And again, that's not really a Tarkovsky thing. He wasn't concerned with that as much as the fundamental
I will say this.
dichotomies at the core of that movie. But I don't think that Soderbergh, and what I really love and appreciate about Soderbergh, I don't think that he sacrifices that philosophy for emotion. I still think that philosophy is still there. That central question presented at the core, at the nucleus of even the Tarkovsky version, is still at the heart of Soderbergh's, but it is much more felt, perhaps less psychological, but I'm okay with that. To me, I much prefer, of course, people know me, I much prefer the emotional element of it, and then there's the performance at the center with Clooney, and also just Soderbergh's filmmaking, the craft of it. Again, while different than Tarkovsky, I don't think is without merit. It still has all those great Soderbergh-isms I love in terms of close-ups, in terms of how he edits, how he jumps time in that film. I just love the craft at the center of it as well. It is maybe underratedly one of his better shot movies. And yeah, I will still argue that it is one of his best, but even if it's not his best, it might be my personal favorite.
Wow. And to your Clooney point, couldn't name you the lead actor of the Tarkovsky Solaris. Apologies to him. But it is, I mean, it's the Soderbergh Solaris, whatever you think of it, you got to admire it. You know, it's a really huge swing. Also, half the length of the original. I mean, just like crazy stuff going on in that movie. It's which is a point in its favor, probably. So, you know, but there's so many movies. He makes so many different kinds of movies that even if you don't like kind of his more popular ones, you'll find something to your taste in his filmography, which is kind of what we're going to talk about today. Yeah,
no, I completely agree. Well, are there any underseen or smaller films of his that resonate the most with you?
Well, I think the first one I'll talk about is one that I think has kind of been reassessed a little bit in his filmography. I think people kind of in the cinephile circles have come to really appreciate this one, but if you ask the average moviegoer, I'm not even sure that they would know what it is, and that's The Limey, which I think is top 5 Soderbergh. I think it's really fantastic. You want to talk about a movie that is just an example of tonal mastery from Soderbergh. I mean, this is the one. This is a very dark film. It's got a really incredible central performance from Terrence Stamp. It's also got some Soderbergh regulars in there, but it's a violent kind of LA neo-noir that's kind of in some ways sending up the very idea of that kind of movie. It's so unromantic in its depiction of the Hollywood Hills of Los Angeles, and it just has such a seedy underbelly to it, and such, again, this wonderful characterization from Terrence Stamp's character, and it's very darkly comedic as well. It's just got so many Soderbergh trademarks, but kind of just one step over into the darkness, which I think is why some people have been really drawn to it in recent years. If you ask, again, kind of the more in the weeds cinephile crowd, they'll say, yeah, this is one of his best. But again, underseen, I think without a doubt, this was maybe his first movie after Out of Sight. Maybe, I don't know. He's made so many movies, I can't say that for sure, but it's right around that time. And, you know, it's so much smaller than that movie, was so much less financially successful than that movie, but it remains one of his best movies.
Yeah, this comes out after Out of Sight, but before Aaron Brockovich and Traffic, so it's like sandwiched right there in the middle, which is perhaps
Of his
why it's
huge successes. Yeah.
But yeah, it is a good movie. I haven't seen it in some years now, but it's a movie that I do remember quite liking. So to your point, maybe it is one of those underseen, underrated, under talked about movies in his filmography. I really do like that one quite a lot as well. Another one that resonates to me, and this is one that I think that you are also high on. Because you and I talked about this on the podcast, I'm pretty sure, was Let Them All Talk.
Yep, that was the next one I was going to talk about.
Yeah, that was 2020, I believe. That one was also very good. And perhaps maybe why that one flew under the radar a little bit is that it comes off the heels of The Laundromat, which was not good.
Certainly the showier of the two films, for sure.
For sure. And High Flying
And the one that
Bird,
opened to more fanfare, too.
For sure. Yeah, I agree. I agree. High Flying Bird also came out in 2019. And while I like that movie, I think it's good, that's one that I think people just kind of skipped over for the most part. And Unsane in 2018 was kind of mixed. It was a little bit of both. Some people really liked it. Others very much did not. So coming off the heels of those three movies, it just felt like Soderbergh had lost a lot of momentum. And so No Sudden Move comes out, and I think just a lot of people overlooked it, didn't really give it much thought. But to me, that was Soderbergh returning to form. Again, I liked High Flying Bird, but No Sudden Move felt like classic Soderbergh to me in terms of storytelling, performance, even structure of that film, how he uses the camera. Like there's a lot of fascinating components to it that I think are very good. It was certainly one of the more underrated movies of whatever year it came out. Was that 2021?
2020.
2020. Yeah, 2020. That's right. Yeah. Very good movie.
Yeah, I mean, Candice Bergen was my best supporting actress winner that year. I think she's remarkable in that movie.
Yeah.
And it was also for me, because I've always kind of had a Streep problem in the last decade or so, where it's like every Meryl Streep movie has to be a Meryl Streep movie. Mm-hmm. And in this one, she really kind of let herself go to a filmmaker and a character again. And I think she's remarkable in this. I mean, it's a movie in many ways about that Soderbergh ethos that I was talking about. It's about an artist who is trying to become less precious about her art.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really fascinating thing to explore in a movie, especially at this point in Soderbergh's career, especially when he has established this new mentality with regards to his art. I think it's really great. It's also just a funny film, a romantic film. There's so much going on in it. It's a fascinating looking film. And that probably needs to be brought up with Soderbergh's films. You know, we talk about the use of digital and how it can be detrimental to these movies. Soderbergh definitely very purposefully uses digital. You know, there is a reason that he uses it. I can understand somebody watching High Flying Bird and being like, I hated looking at that. But for me, it has a thematic purpose. I think he is so purposeful with his camera, and he's just so specific in the way that he shoots things that it really works for me. But then, again, something like Unsane, I found to be incredibly aesthetically displeasing, where I did not like the use of the cell phones in that movie, and I didn't think they served the appropriate thematic effect. So, you know, he's a guy who's just experimenting in a lot of ways, especially now. And Let Them All Talk is kind of a less experimental movie at this point in his career, but a fascinating one nonetheless. Absolutely.
I still think it has elements of experiment to them, though.
Yeah, for sure.
In terms of the camera, but again, also the structure of the film. I also love the meta qualities of that film, because so much of that movie is about artists not having control over their work. And it's so indicative, I feel like, of how Soderbergh probably feels, especially at that time. But maybe even now, given streaming, given the volatility of social media and film discourse, which is always always on edge, I feel like, but the last few weeks, few months, like this time of year, it's the most volatile, I feel like, than it is throughout the rest of the year. Because on one hand, you have something like the Oscars. An award season brings out the worst in film discourse. But there's, like this year especially, it's heightened by something like the sex and film discourse, which...
Oh, we love it. We love to hear it.
Oh, my God.
Get ready for our bonus content on that whole debate.
Absolutely, which is so insane. But, I think a lot of that speaks to what that movie is all about in terms of artists not really having control over it. And so there is kind of this meta component to let them all talk that is really great. And to your point on Unsane, it does sound like I'm maybe a little higher on that film than you, although I do agree it's far from his most seamless work. Mm-hmm. But there is something about the grungy look of it that I think complements that film's psychological underbelly that I do like. I don't know if it all works, but it doesn't not work for me, if that makes sense. I still think there's something about the claustrophobic nature of that film from a camera work perspective that I did find effective. Maybe not wholly, but effective enough.
Yeah, I think that's my least favorite Soderbergh film. But it is an interesting film, and I respect the attempt. I mean, to be honest, I really, really do. But for my next... Yeah, it's not a great one either. So, yeah. But for my next kind of hidden gem, have you seen King of the Hill?
I have not. That is a blind spot for me.
I think that is one that you would really, really like because it is a tender coming of age story. And it is an extremely emotional film. This is from early on in his career. I think this might be his third or fourth movie. So this is still kind of riding off the momentum of Sex, Lies, and Videotape. And he makes this much more gentle, classical film. It's one of the most traditional movies I think he's made, but it's so effective in its kind of classical structure and ideas. And it's so smart in the ways that it doesn't fall into the trappings that some of these movies can fall into, where you have this child character who very often becomes this kind of savant or this, doe in the woods who ends up being more, powerful than everyone around him and understands the world even better than everyone else. And in some ways he does, but it's in these very childlike ways. It has this very measured worldview that I really appreciated. A great child performance at the center of it. Can't remember the kid's name. He's the guy from Clock Stoppers. I don't know. I can't remember his name. He's from Clock Stoppers and Bring It On. But
yeah, reading the synopsis here, it says the film follows the story of a boy struggling to survive on his own in a hotel in St. Louis. Are we sure that's not written by Hirokazu Koreeda? Can we confirm that? Because that sounds like a Koreeda movie to me and not a Soderbergh movie.
It does not sound like a Soderbergh movie, which is kind of what I love so much about it.
It sounds fascinating,
and, you talk about he has such an eclectic kind of catalog of movies, and yet still that doesn't sound like something that he would have made. No. But he did, and he made it in between his bizarre experiments. I think this was the one he made right before Schizopolis, which is just a bizarre movie. And it's just a really kind of much more straightforward film than you're kind of used to seeing from him. But I really appreciate seeing him take that approach and kind of elevating what could be a very standard film. And again, that focus on character that you were talking about on full display here. It's a really emotionally effective film, very empathetic and just a true love for the characters in the film. So King of the Hill, highly recommend you check it out. It feels like something that would be right up your alley.
No, it absolutely sounds like something that I would love. And in the hands of someone like Soderbergh, I know it's early Soderbergh, and he hasn't quite formulated his identity yet. But I'd still be very interested to check that one out. What did you think of Side Effects? I'm curious what you think of that one.
I really like Side Effects. It's kind of a... I don't think there's a ton to grasp onto with it. I just think it's a really, really solid thriller. It's good. I mean, it's got some big pharma stuff going on. I think it's pretty straightforward in that regard. But just as far as the eclectic characters that we see in the film, the performances I think are all fantastic. Kind of some of the reversals that you see in the structure of the film. I think that's an incredibly effective movie. I really like that movie.
Yeah, I really like it a lot as well. If memory serves, and there's been so much that's happened over the last 10 years that who knows, I could be misremembering this. But it felt like that was a movie that was a little polarizing at the time in 2013. But I was always really high on that film as well. I do really like it. Yeah, maybe not his most thematically rich, but as a thriller, it is. I do think it is a very, very good movie with some great performances at the center of it as well. One of the better written. I don't know if it's top 5, but in terms of the writing of it and how Soderbergh utilizes that to just make, what a work of entertainment as he does. I do think it's great. But maybe the performances drive that movie more than anything else. I haven't seen it in some time.
They're great performances. I think Jude
really
Law is awesome in that movie.
Yeah.
He's amazing. And that's one of the earlier examples of the Matt Damon drop-in we get, which he's so famous for now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it's Soderbergh has kind of multiple huge movie stars in his stable as go-tos. He's got Clooney. Mm-hmm. Now his guy is clearly Damon. I think Tatum is definitely in that stable now as well. He's
done, 4 films with
movie
Tatum?
stars. Logan Lucky, I guess he didn't direct the second Magic Mike, but he was definitely involved in Side Effects.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess that's it. So yeah, they definitely clearly have a very good working relationship. But yeah, Side Effects is a really good one. Here's one that's going to be a little controversial. When was the last time you saw The Good German?
Oh God, I don't know. It's been a while. When did that come out? Like 2007, 6?
Let's take a look here. Let's see. 2006.
Yeah, 2006. It says here. Oh, I probably haven't seen it since around that time. I
totally understand why people wouldn't like this movie. I get it. It's got a shtick to it. It's a little one note in some ways as far as the drive behind making it. But again, I love when Soderbergh gets hooked on these ideas and is just better at executing those ideas than other people. And here he's like, I'm going to make Casablanca, but rated R in 2006. And I think it works really well. I think it's a really great movie to look at, which, as you know, oftentimes is enough for me. I'm not going to say The Good German is like a masterpiece, but I think it has such a well-realized aesthetic. And I find those R-rated flourishes, which is really, that seems to be Soderbergh's whole thing with this movie is, I want to recreate that 40s black and white nostalgic classic with the R-rated sensibilities of 2006. And I find that juxtaposition effective all on its own. I find that to be a unique, provocative enough thesis to drive the entire movie home. And I think it's largely emotionally effective. I think Clooney is great in it. I'm not going to sit here and give you, a 5,000 word defense of The Good German because I understand why some people don't like it. But let me just tell you, I'm here for The Good German. I like The Good German. It's far from upper crust Soderbergh, but it's also far from lower crust Soderbergh. I enjoy it a good amount.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I I don't remember liking it at the time all that much, but again, it's been 15 years at least since I've seen that movie, so I'd have to go back and revisit. And I did confirm because, we did a 2006 retrospective. That would have been like 4 years ago now. And so I went to Letterboxd as you were talking there to look to see if I did revisit it for that retrospective, and no, it wasn't even on my radar.
It wasn't. It didn't have enough acclaim to even give a shot to make your best of list.
No, so I'm just gonna have to find the time and give that one a go. Maybe I can pair that with King of the Hill and just have a Soderbergh weekend.
Hey,
one of these days.
Why not?
Why not? Yeah, I mean, certainly do love Soderbergh. As far as hidden gems go, I don't know if I have many others that I love. I guess depending on how you want to define that. I do really like Contagion. We talked about that a little bit earlier. That was a fairly successful movie back in 2011. There's the Che films, which I know you and Ryan talked about on Extra Film, that I don't love. I think outside of the films that I've talked about, my favorite Soderberghs are some of his more prominent movies, such as the Ocean films, Out of Sight, which is up there. That one makes a case as far as his best, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Aaron Brockovich.
I called it the sexiest film ever made, Out of Sight. It is.
Yeah. And I don't disagree.
Remarkable movie. Yeah.
Yeah. Sex and
There's a
Movies?
scene in that movie where
believe
George
that, Jay?
Clooney and Jennifer Lopez look at each other and just laugh at how sexy they are. They're just like, this is hysterical. Look at us. This is crazy.
That won't fly today, Jay. People won't like that.
I would say, it's really despicable what used to go on in movies, JD. I mean, just vile stuff going on.
Can't believe. Can we please just go back to the Hays Code? I mean, so many good movies.
I miss the Hays Code. Oh man.
Because
I mean, it's
that
so
was Hollywood's best time.
It's so funny because we did do our Howard Hawks movie series as well, where we covered Scarface, which was kind of one of the last movies before the Hays Code,
and
then
I
you
watched
see these
that
quotes,
with you guys too.
And you can tell it's pre-Hays Code, and then
yeah.
you see these interviews with Howard Hawks where he's like, "Yeah, the Hays Code sucked. I hated making movies with that thing going on. Like, I just wanted to have a little more fire between the characters." And he was one of the few people who could really pull that out of the characters, even with the Hays Code going on. But you understand. I mean, imagine being like, "All right, here's my vision," and then the government is like, maybe dial that back a little bit. I mean, it's absolute madness, but
it is. Like, it wouldn't like Steven Soderbergh feels like the kind of director that would see this kind of discourse, and his next movie is gonna be to the brim with orgies.
Well, Soderbergh isn't
tackle this directly.
Isn't Soderbergh the guy who they asked him about the MCU, because everybody has to ask every director about the MCU, and his whole thing with the MCU was, the whole thing I don't understand about the MCU is it is so sexless. It feels like a world where sex does not exist. That is his biggest criticism of the MCU. So clearly it's on his mind with the films that he's making, which...
Well, there you go. I mean, and we can certainly have a debate as to, does sex belong in the MCU? I don't, that's a place where I don't
it's not,
because those movies aren't about that, but I do understand that argument.
Yeah. He's not saying they need sex scenes in them. He's just saying they're so devoid. They feel of a different world in the way that they have all of these sexy people in it, but completely suppress any of kind of the carnal instincts that would imply, which I understand, which if I could interject with my final Soderbergh gem, a movie that is very much about sex, The Girlfriend Experience, which is a really good movie. I think maybe his most underrated movie, and it stars an adult film star in her first kind of serious movie role, and it is about many of the same things that Magic Mike is about. It's about, again, it's this very, very much ingrained in the Great Recession. It's a much angrier movie than Magic Mike. It is not as concerned with being commercially viable or popcorn oriented, but it is this really angry film about people who are so repressed and feel like they are stuck between a rock and a hard place in this very particular time in history. And it also, what pays off so well with the casting of this adult performer is that you really feel like she is working so hard to get through the barrier of mainstream film. And so there's this meta element to the entire film that is really effective. It's a really remarkable film. Again, it does kind of call back to his earlier indie sensibilities. It thematically shares as much with Sex, Lies, and Videotape as it does with Magic Mike, kind of about the power structures of sex and sex work, and kind of who has the power in these situations, because oftentimes it is ambiguous and up for debate. So
sure.
If I could just, I don't know if you've seen that one or not. It was
No,
very
that's a blind
small,
spot for me
made
as well,
for
yeah.
almost nothing. And then they made a whole TV show out of it, which he directed, I think, some of. But I think it was a pretty well-reviewed TV show as well. It's a really, really good film. I would say that one is probably one of his least seen movies, but I think it's certainly in the top half of his filmography, which is saying something because he's a very good filmmaker.
No, that's real interesting. Yeah, I haven't seen that. I did see the film Pleasure that came out last year, and there's elements of that in that film as well. But yeah, that's one I'll have to check out on my Soderbergh weekend with the rest of the blind spots. Okay,
you've got like the really provocative Soderberghs to watch.
There you go. Do love me some Steven Soderbergh. He is a filmmaker I quite adore. And again, go check out our review of Magic Mike's Last Dance. It should be up on the channel and on your podcast app of choice. All right, Jay, let's talk about some coffee. You like some coffee?
Oh, boy, do I love coffee. They call me, back in high school, they used to call me Old Coffee Jay. And let's just say I lived up to that nickname. That's what they called me. And even to this day, I mean, I'm a coffee drinking machine.
Well, I was going to say, now that you're a father, are you more coffee oriented now than you were pre being a father?
Oh, it's an absolute must. I mean, I think that's, look, you become a father, you get more emotional, you drink more coffee, you get a dad bod. I mean, it's biological.
It's all
it's really
part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I live off of coffee. It's pretty much an IV to my veins these days. But that's why we love Coffee Cult. They source only specialty grade coffee beans from over 50 countries around the world, inspecting each bean and only selecting the highest grade, meaning that this is the Ferrari of coffees, Jay. The Ferrari of coffees.
Wow. Well, I'm I remember seeing Ford v Ferrari and thinking that maybe Ferrari was the bad guy, but now I'm really questioning myself because I do love Coffee Cult so much. And you know what I love about
Fords,
them?
I guess it just depends on perspective.
That is true. I mean, I'm all about American made. Although obviously what's so great about Coffee Cult is they get their beans from all over the world, which we absolutely love. And the other thing I love about them so much, and I wake up in the morning and I think to myself, what do I love about Coffee Cult? And this is the number one thing.
Okay.
They only source their coffee from farms that pay their workers, especially women, fairly and equally. So maybe check yourself, every other coffee company out there, okay?
Exactly. Ethically sourcing the coffee beans is a major priority. So not only do they roast the coffee themselves, which not all coffee companies do, by the way. They
really
roast
ridiculous.
the coffee themselves. They only get the highest grade possible, and it comes from ethically graded farms. And if that's not enough, they roast to order. So they don't have coffee just sitting around in a warehouse somewhere waiting for it to be shipped. No, they wait for you to order, then they roast, and there's guaranteed 2-day shipping. So when that bag of coffee arrives at your house, you know that it was just roasted. It is extremely fresh, guaranteed to be fresh. They have a variety of different blends. If you're a dark roast guy or a medium roast guy, they have a fun coffee called Road Dog. If you're up at night working, traveling, that's the coffee for you. A bunch of great single origin coffees as well. And right now you can get 15% off with the code ISF. So at checkout, use the code ISF and get 15% off.
And always remember, I was telling my boss this morning. I was talking to my boss this morning. I said, you know what I hate more than anything is when my coffee sits around for weeks at a time before I even take it off the shelf. I said to her, the worst part of waking up is Folgers in my cup. I told my boss, you better put coffee cult in this office or we're going to throw hands. And my boss said, get back to work. And I did. But we're still working on it. Maybe with this 15% off, I can convince the office to finally start stocking coffee cult. So I'm excited about that.
So that's coffeecult.com. Coffeecult.com for your home or for Jay's office. But go check them out. Again, use the code ISF and get 15% off. Jay, let's get to some Q&A.
Yeah.
As I noted, there were some questions last week that we wanted to get to that we kind of ran out of time on. And so I do want to bring them up here. The first question is from Josie DeMarco. And the question is, what is your favorite performance from first-time watches in 2022 or in early 2023? In other words, your favorite performances from older movies you saw for the first time in the last year or so. What do you got for that one, Jay?
So, I do these insane director deep dives. So I'll watch all the films from a director. And last year I took on the filmography of one Tony Scott. And we talked about Matt Damon and George Clooney kind of being Soderbergh's guys. Tony Scott's guy is Denzel Washington. And I already was a big Denzel fan before going on this Tony Scott deep dive, but some of Denzel's best performances are in these Tony Scott movies. I think Denzel's performance in Man on Fire specifically is really remarkable. The way that he is able to balance this man who is so torn apart by his past, but also so full of love for one element of his present, I think is really remarkable. But he also has great performances in Deja Vu. Him going head-to-head with Gene Hackman in Crimson Tide, which is actually my favorite Tony Scott film, is really, really incredible. And, there's plenty of others here, but, we did our Howard Hawks series last year. Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn in Bringing Up Baby. Time, especially Hepburn. I think she's doing some one of the greatest comedic performances of all time, in my opinion. I also did a Bob Fosse watch last year. I don't know if you've seen Star 80, one of the darkest movies ever made. It's about the murder of a Playboy model, and Eric Roberts plays the murderer. He is insanely good in that movie, which is one of those movies that I would not recommend to anyone, despite thinking it is pretty great. Really, really dark film. A couple others just thrown in here. I watched the film Mona Lisa, which is in the Criterion Collection. A really good kind of movie. Bob Hoskins. A good Bob Hoskins performance is tough to beat, and that is a really good Bob Hoskins performance. And finally, I watched the film A Simple Plan, the Sam Raimi film. Billy Bob Thornton, out of control, fantastic in that movie. Love that movie. Love him in it. So those will be my picks.
So a film of mine that I watched recently. This is early 2023, but I had never seen the film Moonstruck before. Are you a Moonstruck fan?
Yeah, I like it. I don't love it, but I like it.
Okay. I do really like the film, but what, pun intended, struck me the most about it is this somewhat weird chemistry between Nicolas Cage and Cher. I do think they're quite magnetic together, but I also feel like they're seemingly from different movies. It's
You're telling me Nick Cage gave like a kind of offbeat performance?
Yeah, I mean, early Nick Cage is off his rocker and in the best ways, and it's funny because Cher
is insane in that movie.
He is, and it's so funny to me because Cher is also very good, obviously, very good in the film. Was recognized for her performance there, and it's interesting because she's channeling this Italian American persona and is very confident in who she is, seemingly knows what she wants, but obviously throughout the film she begins to struggle with that once Nicolas Cage enters the picture. Nicolas Cage, though, is doing Nicolas Cage, and he's so out of bounds that like next to each other, I don't know if they realize they're in the same movie together. Like, it feels like they come from different movies. You know, we're in the world of multiverses galore right now. So, you know, these performances feel like they're from different multiverses, but we're somehow paired together. And I don't know how, but it works. It just works in that film. It's kind of a mystery. And I think that's the best thing about it. So there's that movie. That one worked for me, and came to mind when that question was thrown out there. The other one for me, and I know you've seen this, Jay, and I know you like it. You and Ryan talked about this on Extra Film a few years ago. Robert Altman's Three Women. Oh, baby. Good movie. The
Great
performances, as much as I love and adore Altman's direction, that film might hinge on the performances more than anything else. And Shelley Duvall gives this incredible but tricky performance. She somehow takes what is otherwise the banalities of Millie's life and makes them fragile, as if she's on some sort of edge that could collapse at any moment. And it is really great how she's able to kind of maneuver her way through all of that. Cece Spacek is also quite great in that movie as well. Yeah, that's a movie. That's a real good movie.
That was top 5 Altman for me. That might have been my number. And it was top 5, which, you know, if you listen to that series, that is high praise. That movie is a trip. That is maybe the most unique film in Altman's filmography. Just a whale of a time that one is. Great film.
Yeah, and while this wasn't a first-time watch, it was the first time I had seen it in a really long time. I don't know why, but for whatever reason, I guess I was on an 80s Nick Cage thing, because I also watched Raising Arizona a few weeks ago.
Oh, yeah.
That movie is so good, so funny, And again, Cage is just off his rocker in the best ways. I just adore it. I want that Nick Cage back in my life.
I went on I was a guest on a podcast that covers actor filmographies, and I was on for a Holly Hunter episode. And, obviously she's amazing in that film, but I was just really reminded how great she is in general. There's that unfortunate fact where an actress hits 40, especially, in prior years, and it's like she stops getting good roles. But Holly Hunter, I have often said, if the question is what is the greatest performance of all time, I kind of go to Holly Hunter in broadcast news. She's amazing in general, and Raising Arizona is one of her best performances, one of her best movies. Cage, obviously fantastic too. Cage, he's a perfect match for that very early, very even more madcap than later Coen brothers. That early stage of their career, he's just the perfect firecracker energy for what that movie needed. So
absolutely,
great performance.
And it's incredible how he's able to tiptoe that vibrancy and that energy without ever losing the humanity that is underneath that character as well. There's this incredible, I hesitate to use the word pathos, but there's like this tinge of poignancy underneath that is still always there that I just love in his performance. I don't know how
there's a sense of longing to all of that.
Yeah,
like the whole
absolutely.
The plot of that movie, the driving force of that movie is very sad.
It is. It really is.
And I think it's captured very effectively by the performers. So,
I agree.
Great pick.
Good stuff. All right, the next question here is from Two Peas on a podcast that you and I have both been on.
Yeah, you were just on it.
I was just on it. As of this recording, my episode was released today, so go and check that out. We talked about our top 5
I gotta
child
check that
performances. But he asked, what is one, and this is a question for you and I, Jay, of course, because we are
this is
the
us
awards
to a
people.
T.
Here at InSession Film. What is the one Oscar category that has the most realistic chance at an upset come Oscars night? What do you think?
So I went and did a little research for this one, went to the Vegas odds, went to, a couple odds books.
Yeah.
And I cannot see a world where Brendan Fraser wins Best Actor. I just can't.
Okay.
I can't see it. I think all of that goodwill that he got earlier in the year, I think that's kind of come and gone. And I think it kind of came and went when people saw the movie. And
is he the favorite? Is he the betting favorite?
He is the betting favorite by a decent margin, actually.
I don't know if I would have guessed that. That's interesting.
It's him, and then Butler is second, and Farrell is third.
Oh, okay. That's interesting because, and again, because we're the experts, I would have gathered that Farrell is going to win that either Farrell or Butler. To me, it seems as if Fraser is a distant third, but I'm not going to bet against Vegas. They know what they're doing when it comes to these things.
They do, and I saw it, and I saw it at multiple places, and I was like, this has got to be from like 3 months ago. What is going on here? But no, it was over and over and over again. That was all Fraser, and it feels like it's a little. I think that wave has come and gone, and I could see. I don't know.
I don't think he's going to win either.
I don't know if it would be Butler or Farrell. I think it could be either of those. I think they're both worthy winners, in my opinion. I think they both give amazing performances. I would pick Farrell, but either of those I think would be deserving. It is. I agree. It's funny because usually it's the actress categories where it's kind of this ingenue, new on the scene actress will come and win an acting award. It's very rarely. A lot of times the best actor is the career award, which you would say, Farrell's taken his lumps in the industry. He's had a great career. This is your award to win. But I kind of got a feeling it's going to be Butler, but we'll see. Either way, I would put Fraser third. I would put Fraser third. I don't think those odds make sense to me. And I know he only said one. I got a second one.
Okay.
Are Daniels really going to win director? I cannot see that happening. I don't see that happening. And this kind of contradicts what I said about Fraser. I feel like Spielberg's had that thing locked up for 6 months, even before the movie came out, which maybe is the reason that it's not going to happen is because he peaked too early. But I would be shocked if Daniel Scheinert and Daniel Kwan win that award. I don't know. That one just, those two odds really stuck out to me. There's a couple others, but those were the two where I was like, especially of the bigger awards that I could not understand. Also, maybe be on the lookout a little bit for Michelle Yeoh. Maybe. Although that would be a pretty big upset.
Well, Kate Blanchett winning that would not be a surprise to me if that's who ends up.
I'm saying Yeoh is an upset potential.
Oh yeah,
Blanchett is the heavy favorite.
Gotcha. Michelle Yeoh winning, I don't think. I guess that would be a technical upset, but I don't think many would be surprised. She's still.
I think that's
a lot throughout this season.
I think Blanchett is like, for people who understand betting odds, I think Blanchett is like plus 250. She's like a 2.5 to 1 favorite to win.
Gotcha.
So heavy favorite. I would say a much heavier favorite than either of the previous two I mentioned.
Well, I'll say this, I guess. If we remove betting context and we're just talking about analysis and how the awards season has shaped up, it's not as if Michelle Yeoh has been a distant second to Kate Blanchett. She hasn't. She's been very much right there toe-to-toe with Kate Blanchett. So from that perspective, I don't think it would be all that surprising. Even if Vegas considers it an upset, in terms of the prognosis of it, I don't think that would be too surprising. Or at least I wouldn't be too surprised based off of what I've heard from a lot of Oscar pundits. But it's definitely one of those two. Now, I would be shocked if, let's say, Andrea Riseborough, I know she got the nomination, but if she shocked the world and won that category, now that's an upset. I don't know how realistic that is, quote unquote realistic, but I'm intrigued. I'm certainly intrigued. I did not know about Brendan Fraser being the betting favorite there. That I do think is interesting.
It was surprising.
And as far as director goes, I kind of feel the same way about that category as I do Best Actress, because the Daniels, they very much have been in the conversation. They've won this at several award shows already. They do look like the favorite. McDonough, if he wins, it's most likely going to be for writing.
Yeah.
See, Spielberg did win the Globe, but since then, his momentum has stifled.
Wasn't even nominated for a BAFTA, I believe, right?
Nope. And so I don't know. It's hard to say, but there's
I will say
also,
he won a lot of InSession Film Awards.
He did. He won a lot of InSession Film Awards for whatever that's worth. But I will also say this: there's the old guard of the Academy. I still think have an influence. I think we've seen that over the last few years with certain nominations and wins. Maybe that's even indicative of the Ruben Östlund nomination here, and even the love of that film might be more indicative of the old guard and their influence. I don't know, but I could see Spielberg winning that, though. If that's considered an upset, then I guess it would be. But I'm not going to be against the Daniels winning, though. I do love Everything, Everywhere, All at Once quite a bit. As far as this question, where I sit on it, man, see, this is real interesting. Now, I don't have the betting odds in front of me like Jay does. I'm just looking at this from the prism of perception, the perception, the analysis of it from those that do follow this really closely. So, Martin McDonagh, The Banshees of Inisherin, I would imagine is the favorite there based off of the conversation I've heard. Could the Daniels maybe upset there? I could see that happening.
Saying for screenplay?
For screenplay, yes, for screenplay. Or maybe Todd Field. Maybe that's where they recognize Tar, especially if Michelle Yeoh is going to win Best Actress. then maybe Tar for screenplay is where they
Tar's
go.
got a lot of nominations.
It does.
Tar's it's a sneaky little.
I agree. I feel like they're going to want to honor the film somewhere. I don't think it's going to be Best Picture. Maybe director, but probably not. And again, to your point, it very well just could be that Kate Blanchett.
It feels like actress. It feels like the kind of the There Will Be Blood kind of. We are going to honor this movie by the performance, which is kind of a shame because that would be her third. Michelle Yeoh doesn't have one. I'm kind of a spread the wealth kind of guy when it comes to those awards a little bit. But
I agree. And if the narrative of Michelle Yeoh is what's going to drive the voting, then I'm thinking, okay, well, where would they, where are we going to give Tar love? Maybe that's where they go to Todd Field and writing. I could just see that being a possibility. As far as another category, now this feels locked up, but does Marcel the Shell with Shoes On have a chance in animated film?
Nope.
You think so?
Nope.
No, I was just wondering because I know there's a lot of love out there for that movie. I think Del Toro's Pinocchio has it locked up. I really do.
For people who understand betting, and also I mixed up the plus and minus earlier because I don't really gamble, but Pinocchio is a minus 1,400 favorite to win Best Animated. 14-1 favorite to win animated. So
okay,
that would be a heck of an upset.
That would be a heck of an upset. And again, this is maybe galaxy braining this a little bit, but the other category I'm thinking of is Best Original Score. I don't know if you have the odds for that in front of you, but it feels like
Babylon was the betting favorite.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That feels like a category for Justin Hurwitz to lose. However, if we're galaxy braining this and we're thinking about what could be an upset, is this the last time that John Williams could be recognized in this way? Because he's got one score left. And if we're being honest, probably won't be nominated next year.
What is that? What is it? I don't know. I'm blanking.
Jones,
what is it?
Right?
Oh, Indiana Jones, of course.
Indiana Jones. I don't foresee that necessarily getting to next year's Oscars. So if the thinking is, hey, look, Justin Hurwitz is great. He's young. He'll have more opportunity. This will be the last time for us to honor John Williams in this way. If enough voters think that way, could that upset? I could see that happening.
I like that one.
Feels like
and that one's kind of a toss-up. Hurwitz is the favorite, but barely. It's kind of a toss-up.
Okay.
So
and
I
I'm
like
with
that
you.
one.
I love John Williams and his work there. So, okay. The next question here is from this guy that I know. His name is J.D. Duran.
Interesting.
Anyway, his question here is for Jay. What did you think about the trailer for The Flash?
It is truly wild that people are now just like, yes, Ezra Miller back as the Flash. Incredible. Finally, the people have demanded it. It is, it was, there were some decent trailers during the Super Bowl, but I would not say The Flash was one of them. It really did. Oh, the glasses are coming off again.
Oh, here we go.
It was,
here we go.
If you want to talk about a movie kind of leaning into the worst tendencies of, I think, franchise filmmaking today, that seemed to be the vibe I was getting from The Flash. As great, I mean, look, the money shot, obviously, is Michael Keaton coming back and saying, I'm Batman.
I'm Batman.
And that made me queasy. I did not like that at all. You want to talk about cheap tactics? My, oh my. I mean,
do we think that's just for the trailer, though?
The line itself or him in the movie?
The line itself.
The line was brutal. Oh, man. It might. Honestly, I hope so. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I love Michael Keaton, too, but I saw him show up, and it was bleak. It was a bleak moment. I don't know. Obviously, the DC EU or whatever they call it is in this really weird spot right now. We talked about it on last week's show.
Yeah.
It feels like this is just a leftover movie, right? I mean, it's like we're not going to get another Ezra Miller Flash movie. This is the last one. This is the first and last one. And they had it in the can before all of his nonsense started happening. And so they have to release it. They're clearly grasping at straws a little bit at this point. Which
Jay, they don't have to release it. They canned a whole damn Batgirl movie.
Well, they did. I mean, they can write it off, basically. They're like, well, you know, they give us back $225 million on our taxes because we lost so much money on this movie. That Batgirl thing is really weird. That hasn't really been. There needs to be some sort of oral history of that whole situation at some point.
They
that was weird.
A whole, not just a whole, a finished movie. It was done.
They were like,
and they said,
and then at the press conference, they're like, it wasn't. The quality was not up to stuff. And I'm like, you guys really Suicide Squad.
I was gonna say, I don't buy that. When you look at the totality of the DCEU, quality not necessarily their priority.
Which one was the Suicide Squad was the James Gunn one, right?
Yeah.
Suicide Squad was the old one. Yeah.
Which
Suicide Squad, the original.
Yeah,
garbage.
I love the irony. We didn't talk about this last week because we didn't have time, but I love the irony that they make a Suicide Squad movie and they hire a director that is nothing like James Gunn to do that movie. And he makes it the way he wants to make it. But the trailer that comes out is very James Gunn-esque. So they have to recut that whole movie because we have to remember the year before the Guardians of the Galaxy comes out and it takes the world by storm. It does very, very well. So they recut that movie to capture that Guardians of the Galaxy magic.
Yeah.
It clearly does not work. And all these years later, who did they hire to make the sequel or remake or whatever you want to call it? The guy that directed the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Still waiting for the Ayer cut. I know there's a great movie in there. Absolutely
Might
not.
be.
That was brutal. No. Oof. That one was so far away from being any good whatsoever.
But to be fair to Ayer, that film was nothing. I believe him. I don't think that film was anything the way, because it doesn't have the Ayer ethos at all, at all. And it's not just Ayer saying these things. All the actors have said this. Producers have confirmed this as well. That
but it is
nothing
like
the way
just
it was made.
his whole idea behind that movie, making it so grim, and I mean, you see his Joker, and I'm like, well, yeah, there's no way this was ever going to be good. Obviously, if this is what he thinks the Joker should be, yeah,
well,
absolutely.
I mean, why hire him? Like, it's not as if his previous.
Oh, it's a
work
horrible, because they were trying to do the anti-Marvel thing. It's like, well, who's the who can we get? Snyder, Ayer, yeah. Who doesn't make any sense at all to make these movies?
Yeah.
Oh, David Ayer. Yeah, of course.
Anyway, I just thought that was an interesting little irony. And now James Gunn is heading all of this. For a little bit of a different perspective, I didn't hate the trailer to The Flash as Jay did. But you do make a good point regarding Ezra Miller. However, I'm a big believer that when it comes to these polarized extremes, very few things end there. Most of life generally is in the middle, is in this gray area. And I'm a believer that two things can be true at once. And Ezra Miller should have been fired a long time ago. They probably have only kept him around because this movie was coming out and they still need him technically.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
On the log sheet. And he's problematic. There's absolutely no denying that. However, I do think everything else around him can still be good, and I do think there are some interesting things to the trailer around Ezra Miller. Michael Keaton certainly being one of them. The line "I'm Batman" is certainly tacky. I firmly believe that is only there for the trailer to hype up people that he's in this movie. I don't believe for a second that he's going to say that in the actual movie. And then we know Batfleck is coming back for a little bit of this as well. Someone made a great point on Twitter earlier today that Michael Shannon might not know that he's in The Flash, which just feels so true to me. Like, I wouldn't deny that for a second. But to have him back in this universe is compelling to me. He's one of the best things about Man of Steel. So, in terms of resetting the DCEU, this, I think, has promise. And maybe my perspective is also this. They announced this film in 2014. It has been almost 10 years since they announced that this movie was coming out. It has
That is so insane.
Been in production hell for years, for a long time. Now, not necessarily because of the film itself, but the larger DCEU.
Just the dysfunction of the DCEU.
Absolutely. Yeah. But as a result, this film has been pushed back and been pushed back, such as Black Adam, because Black Adam was also talked about in 2014, and we got that last year. And if that film is any indication, then perhaps The Flash is still not going to be great. But I'll say this. The trailer, to me, with all of that in mind, didn't feel like a complete dumpster fire. And that's what I was anticipating. And I do think there's some promise here. I'm also trying to be a little bit hopeful because I've been mostly positive when it comes to Marvel. The DC films haven't really worked for me all that much. Although I did like the Zack Snyder version of Justice League that was dropped on Netflix or whatever that was.
HBO Max.
HBO Max. Yeah, there we go. That makes sense. I don't know why I didn't think of HBO Max. I did like that. But aside from that, the DC films haven't worked for me. So I'm also trying to grasp onto whatever hope I can. And it does feel... I do feel conflicted that it comes from the Ezra Miller movie because I don't condone him or his actions or anything that he's done. I don't necessarily want to support him. But the film itself, if we're separating, the problem child from the film itself, is there potential there for the movie as a standalone movie to be effective? I do. I do think... certainly pandering for sure, bringing back all of these Batmans, and they're trying to do what Marvel did with the last Spider-Man movie and all of the fun from that. I do think there's promise here. It doesn't look like a dumpster fire. The final product very well still may be bad, and I wouldn't be too surprised if that's the case. But as a trailer, I think they did a good job of hiding whatever faults it has. And pandering to, the geekdom that people will that they're craving for when it comes to that specific material. So, I liked it way more than I anticipated. I was expecting a lot worse.
As far as the Ezra Miller pushback is concerned, you don't have to explain yourself for me. I'm the guy last week who was like, Mel Gibson, ooh baby.
We praised him. Yeah, we talked
Woohoo!
about it. Yeah. Look,
we love Big Melly.
And again, very problematic. I just think two things can be true. And the film can be good,
for sure.
And
for
he
sure.
can still be
That's
awful.
not why I think that's not why I have problems with the trailer. I
know.
The problem with the movie too is just it's an afterthought. We know this movie is going straight into the incinerator. This is something they're only releasing because they already had it made. So it's a very weird.
Well, they already have it made, but also, and this is the real reason they need this film and they can't Batgirl this movie, is that James Gunn is needing to reset the DCEU, as we talked about last week.
Oh, so is this going to be like the canonical reset?
Yes, from a functional, pragmatic perspective, at least within the rules of superhero movies and how they work. This film will function as it'll restart the timeline, so it'll give them a reason, much as what Marvel is going to be able to do with their multiverse saga, and maybe bringing back old characters that have maybe died off or have phased out. you can bring them back because it's a different world. We're in a different part of the multiverse. This is going to be DC's version of that. So it'll allow them to reset and for James Gunn to move forward with the way he wants things to look. So that's the real reason this movie's coming out more than anything else. And to your point, after it's out, is Ezra Miller done? Wouldn't surprise me.
Probably. Did I miss the movie where Fast and Furious established the multiverse so that they can bring back every character as well?
I think so, yeah.
I must have. Okay.
So what I love about Fast and Furious is they said, look, we don't need rules. We don't need a we're just going to bring back
physics
from the dead.
Out. Mortality out. Biology out.
Like, we don't care. Like, we don't. Yeah, screw the rules. We're just going to jump over. We're going to fly over them. Yeah, once Vin Diesel flew like Superman in the 5th movie, it was a different ball game after that. Like, those movies were.
Yeah. God. Fast 10 coming soon.
It is. All right, let's talk about this week's poll.
It's real bad. Okay? I don't like those numbers at all.
Just one poll? Those things aren't scientific.
Yes, they are. All this is science. This is math.
Okay, so for this week's poll, we asked all of you, with the release of Magic Mike's Last Dance, which do you prefer? Magic Mike 2012 or Magic Mike XXL from 2015? Jay, have you seen the results of this by chance?
I have not.
Okay. Since you haven't seen the results, what is your best guess here?
I'm guessing it will be the original for one, the Soderbergh of it all.
Okay.
I think people will give it a little credit for that. I prefer it because I think it's a little more thematically potent, but I wouldn't be shocked if it's the second one, but I'm going to guess it was the first one, probably like a 60-40 margin.
See, that's interesting because I came into this with the antithetical mindset because I felt like in 2015 with XXL that I was in the minority with still preferring the original over XXL. It felt like, at least at the time, that XXL, like people were raving over that.
There's
movie.
a little bit of a
Really
wave of that.
it.
Yeah.
And so I was curious. Now, that said, XXL did win this poll, but it was close. It was way closer than I anticipated. I honestly thought that XXL would win this quite easily. And we had a handful of votes here, so it's not as if this is a small sample size. And XXL wins the poll with 52% of the vote.
Wow. Close.
So it was close. It was close. A lot of love still for that original Magic Mike. And I did not anticipate that. So thank you to everyone for the great surprise there. But
Very
I'm with
interesting.
You. I really do appreciate XXL for this film about
it's a really good
camaraderie.
movie.
And the choreography, the dancing is great. But I do agree with you. I think the first Magic Mike is a little bit more thematically resonant, and that that does have the edge for me slightly. Comparatively,
there was also something about the shock to the system of the first one. The second one, it was impossible for it to have because it was the second one. It was just really exciting to see that movie made the way it was and be as interesting as it was.
I agree.
So,
I agree. All right. Well, thanks to everyone that voted on the poll. We really do appreciate it. Next week on the show, it's going to be real interesting because Ant-Man, the new Ant-Man movie comes out. Speaking of superhero movies that are absolutely changing the rules, Ant-Man, this new film is we're obviously entering into the multiverse saga, and this is going to be the thrust forward. So we'll be talking about that movie and the state of the Marvel Union, if you will.
State of the MC Union.
And it's going to be a fascinating conversation because
should I skip this episode?
I was going to say, I don't know. Do you and Ryan really want to do this next week?
I actually think I think it's a very fascinating conversation. I'll bring a dissenting voice, perhaps, but
Yeah.
it is although I'm pretty level-headed about it. I just think it's a really interesting kind of point for the series. I mean, look, America's got a bad case of Quantumania right now.
They do.
And I'm sure that movie's going to make, well over $100 million, I anticipate, in its opening weekend. So, who's to say that anything is broken? But I think there's some cracks, perhaps.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that in the State of the MC Union.
We will. We'll get into it next week as a little appetizer. I think what's so interesting to me about Quantumania, because this last phase of Marvel was a little polarized.
Yeah.
A lot of it was exploring the aftermath of Endgame, obviously. And I liked it for the most part. But as we get to Quantumania, we're heading right into the weird. We're going right into strange Marvel
I have heard it's weird, which is good.
And I'm excited for it to get very complicated and very confusing, and nothing makes sense, and it's going to be all over the place. I can't wait for the weirdness to begin. So we'll talk about that more next week, and of course we'll have a review of Quantumania coming out. We do have a review of Magic Mike's Last Dance up right now. So be on the lookout for that. I will tease this. I don't know when we're going to release this information, but Ryan and Jay have a new movie series coming up on the horizon. I'll just leave it at that for now, but you'll want to stay tuned. It's going to be a lot of fun. Also, be sure to check out our latest Women in Session podcast. They just got done doing 2 weeks of Amy Adams. Part 1 and Part 2 are both up. It was really a lot of fun. Do urge people to go and check that out. Also want to quickly plug some Patreon content that we're going to have coming up soon. I'm going to get together with the great Christian Eulenberg, and we're going to talk about The Last of Us. Jay, have you been watching The Last of Us at all?
Negative. Been catching up on a lot of older TV. You know what I've been watching? Soderbergh's The Nick.
Ooh, see, that's a blind spot for me as well. I've heard that's very good.
It's good.
But sign up for Patreon. That's patreon.com/InSessionFilm. And we'll have some content coming there where we'll talk about The Last of Us. We're going to do that in 2 parts. We'll have a review of episodes 1 through 5. And then in another month or so, we'll recap the first season of The Last of Us. So be on the lookout for that. Of course, follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Email us InSessionFilm@gmail.com. Be sure to subscribe here on YouTube or on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, however you listen to us. And, of course, you can visit everything we have to offer at InSessionFilm.com. With that, it was a lot of fun. Jay, thanks for being here and chatting with me this week, my friend.
Absolutely. Always a great time. We weren't at each other's throats this week, which is a huge change of pace. A welcome change of pace, in my opinion. But
I agree.
maybe I think next week might be. Thank God there's more people on the episode, because that could have gotten ugly.
Yeah, next week's going to be fascinating nonetheless. So definitely stay tuned for all of that. And we will see you all next time on the InSession Film Podcast.
Guardians of the Galaxy 3 looks good.
Yay!